And I was just supposed to say, deaf, deaf, deaf. And I think they turned the microphone all the way down. But still, I was standing there in front of that audience with Metallica, just realizing, wow, this is the best idol that I've ever heard.
All right, so I wanted to start off this episode a little bit by saying, Inti, why I'm super hyped to have you here, okay? And I don't know that I've ever told this story before on the podcast. But essentially, the way that I got into live hacking events in the beginning was I was a +1 of a +1. So one of my buddies just kind of ran into Ted Kramer. I don't know if you remember Ted Kramer, yeah. And
I do.
And yeah, of course, how could we forget? And he was like, hey man, I'm a hacker as well. And Ted was like, oh, you should come to the live hacking event in DC. And so he's like, great. Can I bring my friend Justin or Rhinorator? I think is what he said. And then at that moment, John Bottarini, right? John Bottarini was standing nearby and he's like, wait, did you just say Rhinorator? Oh, he just found a really weird bug on like XYZ target, right? And then Ted was like, oh, cool. Well, yeah, sure. Let him come or whatever, right? Yeah, if he can make it, bring it on. And so I went to that live hacking event and I somehow placed 8th and became good friends with Kevin Rosenbaum, right? At that event. And because of that, they invited me to San Francisco. And then when I get to San Francisco, I get a show and tell, right? And after that show and tell, I was like, they invited me to the next one. So I was like, okay, the show and tell is the key, to getting access to other live hacking events. And who is the master of the show and tell but Inti? And every live hacking event that I went to, at the time, you were in the live hacking event circuit at the time as well. Inti was getting show and tell after show and tell after show and tell after show and tell. It was sort of like a meme, how is Inti gonna get show and tell this time? So that's why I'm really excited to have you on the pod, because you just have these crazy show and tell bugs, and I think it's left a big impact on all of us that were in the live hacking event scene at that time. So with that, man, welcome to the pod.
Thank you. And I gotta say on the show and tell that the pressure really helped, actually.
Yeah.
It was a paradox. Like, at first I didn't like it because I knew you have to perform for live hacking events, but I also had to hit that holy grail of show and tell every single time.
Yeah.
But in the end, I always found a way to do it. So, and yeah, I'm still proud of that. Like, most people have awards for like a lot of critical bugs, etc. And most of my bonuses that I ever got was just like show and tell bonus or like funniest bug. They once did like the most creative bug award.
That's also known as the Inti Award. That's great, man. It should
get a trademark on
that. Seriously. And no, so I mean, and I think show and tell has a really unique part of the live hacking event experiences, because it is what helps. I mean, obviously, when you're at the live hacking events, you're collaborating with other hackers, you're talking with other hackers as well, right? But the show and tell piece, that is what really, you get an in-depth explanation with visuals, with, in your case, very engaging humor and very creative attack vectors. And that's what helps us grow as hackers in that sort of context as well. And I know some of the times that I've grown the most from live hacking events is looking at show and tell, specifically yours. So
the best moment in a show and tell, it's like when you're at like slide 2 or 3 and everybody sees like a page that literally everybody in the audience looked at, and you just know, oh damn, I just realized what I missed there. And everybody is like super excited, but also a little bit bummed out because they could have found that bug.
Dude, I think you did that. You used to do that so well too, with the show and tells, because it's like, and then there's the moment you go to that slide and everyone's like, like, no, like, and you can almost hear the vision. I mean, sometimes you can, you're like, what, like this place? So I think that's such a great piece.
I can't even tell you how many times I've seen a bug in a show and tell that I've tried like almost like either that exact same thing on a different target, or I've tried like I was trying similar things and I just gave up and I was like, okay, I can't get around this, and I just moved on. It's oh man, it's amazing. I think the big thing about your show and tell skills is just like you have this amazing presentation ability where like
it's the showmanship.
It's the showmanship. It's like you have a very good like speaking like experience. I don't know, your public speaking skills are very good, and so your way of presenting your bugs is very like everybody can understand it. Everybody's very involved. Like you really hook the whole audience, myself included. And so I think that's just one of those things that makes the Inti show and tell just like so much more elevated.
Legendary, man. And so
well, thank you. And it's a nice compliment coming from both of you. And I think that honestly, it's in a show and tell, it's more about the story than the bug, because in all honesty, not all of my bugs were great. In fact, I think I have I'm holding the record of having the lowest rated bug with the highest bonus on HackerOne. So I'm quite proud of that. So I think that attack scenario involved like kidnapping the queen of England, like something like that. It was ridiculous. And I remember the program managers like telling me like, I can't believe we're paying for this, but still they did. It's about the story,
dude. Oh my gosh, I just got flooded with memories. That I remember that show and tell, and there was like some like the character limit was too long for you to show the destination of where they were going, so you could kidnap the queen. Oh man. Oh gosh.
Just think about the impact.
I mean, that would be a disaster.
All the royalists would be super upset.
That would be terrible.
It is really interesting that you point that out, though, because I think like there's always like two aspects to like a bug bounty report, and a lot of people when they write a bug bounty report, they think about it like as if they're doing a show and tell. Like they'll write it out and they'll be like, well, I was looking through your website one day and I came across this really interesting endpoint. And like from a report perspective, most of the time they don't really care about that. But if you were to take that exact report and like put it into a show and tell context, it would probably do like pretty well, because it's very like that storytelling. Like it explains where you were coming from as a hacker, like the whole like mental aspect, like how you're approaching the problem. And those things really matter for a show and tell. They don't matter so much for a report. But I think like everybody kind of has that ability, and it's about sort of like harnessing it to like show it in the right way.
Yeah.
But still, during a live hacking event, I would argue that you have to, I mean, that team, and you know this best of all, Joe, like you're getting hundreds of reports in a few days. And if you want to get that show and tell, you got to ask yourself the question, if you're drafting a report, how can I make this report memorable without, exaggerating too much, because then they will think I'm a spammer. And that, like, there's a thin line. But I remember in that report, my title said like, literally results in kidnapping.
Oh my gosh.
It wasn't a lie. And my report got triaged right away. So
that's some serious impact.
I don't think there's many people who can say that they reported a bug on HackerOne or any hacking platform that says results in kidnapping in the title.
Results in kidnapping. Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah, but we have a section.
One last thing I need to say about that. About impact, and then I'll let you do your thing. Recently, and this was at Intigriti, and I do have permission to talk about this.
Great.
But it was with a client of ours. Of course, I cannot tell you which client. And so basically, what the hacker reported was simply like an authorization bug. I mean, it was like a missing permission check. And we got to the client because it was fairly critical. And that client started panicking, and they said, the actual impact of this is that people could die.
Oh no.
So that was their impact assessment. And sometimes if you think about it, we bug bounty hunters, we look at an IDOR and we will see, okay, I can change this bit of data. But if that bit of data is, for example, and it was not in that case, but if that's, for example, a blood type of a person in a production environment, then you have a serious problem. And not all hackers think like that. I would say that if you want to find good bugs, you have to think like a hacker, not as a Q&A tester. And I all respect for Q&A testers. They can find good bugs.
Phenomenal.
They can probably get paid more if they think about the story.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's crazy. And whenever you're dealing with those products that intersect with real life, sometimes it's information, and we'll talk about information a little bit more later, and some of your work that you've done with privacy related stuff, and all of that's very important. But when it comes down to stuff like like transportation, like medical stuff, like all of these things that interact with our bodies, right?
Yeah.
Then things become way more critical, and it does start to make you realize that the work that we do here, especially in those environments, has a very large impact on people. And I've no doubt that bug bounty reports have saved lives.
Yeah. It's super
so
interesting
really
to me
cool,
when we
really
think
cool place
about
to be.
like how internet is starting to affect more and more things. Like I know we've talked about like Internet of Things and how everything is more internet connected, but I think especially nowadays it's getting more and more so where almost everything is on the internet. Like heart pacemakers, cars, computers, phones, cameras, door sensors, door lock, like everything. It's all on the internet, and so many of those things are vulnerable attack surfaces to the point where even certain programs will pull things out of scope. Like United is a great example where nothing on the in-flight like infotainment or any of that stuff is in scope because they don't want people to like risk hacking stuff while the plane is in the air, because there's so much risk involved there. Even if the systems are completely separated, they don't want to even take the chance of like having somebody test on it. And so it's super, super interesting to see how that's changing over time, and how even though it's dangerous, more and more stuff is going online that probably shouldn't be online, but is online. And now those impacts of like chance of death, like this is like a real thing, and it's not just like an edge case now.
Yeah, absolutely. And Inti, you've worked a little bit with the United program, right? Have you hacked on them?
I have, yeah, I have in the past. Not sure if I can disclose a lot about them. I
Yeah,
think they're a great team. They
yeah,
have their own way of assessing severities,
yeah.
which is a choice.
Did you say
But then
he
again,
said it's a choice.
That is a choice. Yes.
yeah, but one
Well
so one
said.
thing I do have to say there is that I always, and I, as a working at the bug bounty platform,
hmm
I work with a lot of clients that may have their reasons. And Joel, I mean, you've also seen both sides, right?
hmm
Sometimes we hackers, we easily assume, or we just take, you don't even want to know how many reports, for example, we see, like in this HackerOne report or
hmm
this big crowd report,
hmm
this got assessed this way.
mm
And for some companies, things are just different. And what I just think is really important, and in United's case, they do point that out in the program
hmm
description at the defense is you have to be transparent.
hmm
It's all about expectation
hmm
management. If you're upfront with the way you score vulnerabilities, even though I as a hacker do not agree with that,
hmm
then that's, I mean, not their
Yeah.
problem necessarily. I can just choose to move on and to do something
Yeah.
else instead.
Or in the case that we saw recently with VISS being implemented in the Zoom bug bounty program, you can also choose to game the system with that same standard set of standards, right? So I think Zoom uses VISS. A lot of other places use CVSS, and then I believe United uses the OWASP model for
Risk rating,
OWASP risk rating model. Yeah, but each one of these models has their own, I guess, quirks, right? Little weird things that you can do as an attacker. And one of the things we saw at the Zoom event was one of the hackers, Tom Anthony, found a great way to game the system for VISS, right? And get bugs rated higher than you would normally expect them to be rated. And that worked out well for him in the event. And I think that's just a part of the system, right? That's a part of the game for hackers and programs.
Yeah, I think that's a Twilight territory, honestly, because I mean sometimes, and I mean we do see both sides of
hmm
the table. Sometimes people will game the system to death, and
hmm
if you're a large
Yeah.
enterprise, you can afford that, and it's just a rounding error. But especially for smaller companies,
Yeah. That hurts.
while they still care about, of course, being consistent, it can be a little bit tricky. So I do expect hackers to point out, I mean, I prefer hackers to point out any flaws that they may see in the policy, because we may even give an additional bonus for that. It wouldn't be the first time that we said, okay, your report resulted in a policy change. We're actually going to pay out for the policy change rather than for the bug that turned out to be. So, I mean, even duplicates can sometimes be very exotic, because like sometimes you will have, it's not necessarily the same root cause, as in it's not necessarily the same code patch. But then if you would look to the process, for example, on how to they deploy all the instances, they could also have fixed it over there. So if a program wakes up with 100 submissions of essentially the same finding, well, are they really expected to pay out 120? I wouldn't say
I don't think so.
It would be correct to pay out one. I wouldn't say that it would be correct to pay out 120. It's sometimes you got these edge cases. And HackLuke, just to give him a shout out, has done a very interesting proposal on how programs or platforms should deal with these situations.
Oh, really? I don't know that I've seen that.
Yeah, I haven't either.
Yeah, he's created bug bounty standards on
Oh, yeah, I did actually see that.
I wouldn't... Yeah.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I think it's exactly what you're talking about. Like, you see this a lot, both from like the program side. I'm sure every hacker has kind of dealt with this situation in one form or another. But essentially, you're put in a situation where you may have found something systemic, or you may have found like a repeated issue or something like that. And you realize that this is something the team cares about and something that they'll pay for, but it may be very, very similar. And then you're in this ethical dilemma where it's like, should I make as much money as I can here and report these things as separate issues, or should I group them together in good faith and tell the team and hope that they award me accordingly for that? And they'll probably fix it in one place and I'll lose a bunch of money, but it's the right thing to do. And I think that there's no real clean cut answer, but I'll have to take a look at what HackLuke put together there, because that sounds really interesting. I do agree that like I don't think it should be really one or the other. It should be kind of in between, but it's really hard to define where that is.
And ideally, there's also like consistency across all platforms. And that is also why, at least for the first time with Intigriti, that we have had a meeting in Las Vegas during DEF CON with both Buckraut, HackerOne, and Intigriti to discuss some of the, I would say, issues, but maybe more challenges that we can work on together, just so that the community and the client base and just the industry as a whole would benefit from. And I think we need to align on like proposals for standards like that, but also other things. For example, we had the unfortunate event that two live hacking events were colliding. So they were basically during the same day.
Yeah.
But, you know, a lot of the top talent is present on all the platforms. And then, you know, nobody really wins, because as a platform, you see that your talent may want to go to the other or vice versa. And then the hackers are also missing out on that additional event. So I think it's just good for us to align a little bit more and just work together when it comes to the community. And it's been really great. I mean, it's there's such cooperative, wonderful people to work together with.
That's awesome. And the heart was warmed when I saw that post on Twitter, you know, with you and when Kodingo and Jessica, and it's just like, you know, mom and dad all living together in harmony, and it's great. And so we
did a little swag exchange.
Oh, that's cute. I like that. That's great. So I mean, did that go? I guess that was one of the things I had on the list to talk about. Did that go like? I mean, do you think you'll see that collaboration? Was that bridge sort of formed? How did that meeting go from your perspective?
So actually, there was already some sort of collaboration. I mean, we've been emailing,
we've been
slacking a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, because if there's, for example, a new trend or a concern with the community or in the industry, I mean, it's always best for us to align. I mean, literally nobody wins from having disagreements on a community level. It's also extremely confusing for the community. Ideally, everybody has the same experience, regardless of the platform, and honestly, also regardless of the program.
Right.
So I think we've been doing that in a more informal way, and it was just good to now have these discussions in person as well. and also go for a more formal approach, meaning that if I suddenly drop that tomorrow, that this thing can be continued as well.
Right,
This-
right.
I'm not planning to.
Yeah,
I mean, we were talking about
Yeah,
death
but I'm
earlier.
saying-
So.
Kidnapped
No,
because of a bug. Yeah.
This does remind
As long
me.
as the hackers are doing our jobs, keep Inti live.
This does remind me a lot, though, of like the safe harbor discussions that were happening like a couple years ago, before safe harbor was sort of like a default type of thing across a lot of programs and platforms, where everybody was kind of aligned in terms of like how we felt like things should be going and how things should be handled. But it was very much so up to programs and platforms individually to determine and set out the guidelines and the guardrails for how things would actually happen, and be like, this program specifically designates safe harbor in there, and if they don't, then it's not there, right? And like, I think now that it's been sort of like adopted as safe harbor. It's not like a HackerOne thing. It's not like a bug crowd thing. It's not an Intigriti thing. It's just like safe harbor is safe harbor. And generally most programs should have it and should try and adhere to it, because that's what makes security research a safe and a productive thing. And I think we're starting to get there with this same type of like relationship, where the programs, like, it really makes me think back on like the old rivalries between like Google and Apple and Adobe, and how like Apple would never add Flash Player into Safari or on iOS and stuff like that. Or how like iMessage is with like Android and that kind of stuff, where we're now getting to a point where regulators are stepping in and saying this like type of business like disagreement or like business competitiveness isn't productive for the rest of the people who are within the ecosystem, and it's time to step past that and put it to the side and just like move on and let your business be competitive in other ways, and let there be certain ground-based factors that are shared across all of the companies and across the entire community that everybody can take advantage of.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, I've been doing this. I've joined Intigriti in 2017, and maybe I've just been looking, but I've rarely come across any form of toxic competition.
That's great.
Crowd and HackerOne. Of course, I mean, sometimes it may happen that, a salesperson may say something that is not fully aligned, and then it's on us to better coach them, etc. But I've always felt like, in the eyes of the community, I mean, we share the same super valuable community. And at the end of the day, all platforms right now are still 100% dependent on the willingness of that community. So it's community that is boss, and it's up to us to figure out how we can make sure that we make progress while maintaining we see our community as a client, and then of course we also have the client base.
Right.
And sometimes it's hard to balance that out. I mean, I also sometimes read blog articles from well-meaning and well-intending hackers saying bug bounties should be like this or like this. And the thing is, like, hypothetically, I agree with them. They're making good points, but then if you're walking in a platform environment where, you have the industry, you have the clients, and you need to make sure that everybody moves at the same pace, not only the hackers, but also the clients. And I think that change can only accelerate if we, as the three biggest platforms, can just work together. So yeah, I'm super stoked about this, and I hope to be able to update you on more progress soon.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, it seems like we're moving in the right direction with that, and I think that'll improve the experience for everyone involved. So I guess we went down a little rabbit trail. I'm gonna bring it back because one of the things we were talking about in the beginning was your ability to present and your ability to do show and tell and your public speaking prowess. And I think that's a pretty core piece of the way that you've been in the community as a hacker. And I imagine all of that actually started from your radio experience. And as a podcast, we're sort of like, I guess, radio adjacent. So I want to hear about your radio history and how you kind of got into that field and any tips and tricks you might have picked up along the way.
I mean, just to get that out of the way, I didn't have my own show or anything. I was not a radio presenter. I worked at a radio station, however.
Okay, gotcha.
And sometimes I was called in to tell a little bit about about cybersecurity in general. If there was something going on, like WannaCry or whatever, I would typically go and talk about it for a national audience. And basically then the challenge was to make sure that you explain things in a way that is factually correct, while still making sure that people don't just switch stations
Right.
because you're getting too technical. And that is, I've learned a lot in that space, and it's a real art, honestly, because then you also, like, if you're not technical enough, then your core fan base or the people that really appreciate you as a hacker will start thinking like, what is this guy saying? Like, can't he just give some proper details? And I always love that balance. I think radio for me, because most of the times I was mostly doing the socials, like just doing website stuff as well. But I was in an environment surrounded by passionate people that knew everything about the subject that I didn't know anything about, which was music. They were extremely passionate, and like they were the best of Belgium. And what I really like about Belgium as well is that, I mean, the best of Belgium, there's only 11 million people here, right? I'm not sure how many people live in New York, but maybe it's about equal.
Probably less than
it's
that.
Like 4 times that in California.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
but it also, I mean, I'm grateful for it, because we all still have stuff like the public broadcast company and the national stations. And it makes it, I guess, a little bit easier for a person like me to step up and to reach audience. And I would come into the studio and we would talk with the Prime Minister of Belgium, with politicians that actually can make change happen.
Wow.
And one of those changes that I'm particularly proud about, and this is not only my work, I played a very tiny role in that, is that unauthorized testing in some conditions is now completely legal in Belgium. So you can go and hack a Belgian company as long as afterwards you make your reports. And that can be on their computer. There's a couple of rules attached to it, but if there's like a SaaS business in Belgium, then you can just, if their computers are in Belgium and you're a Belgian citizen, you will no longer be prosecuted for hacking them and reporting a vulnerability to them.
Wow.
Which I think is super cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it almost feels like, you know, like the parallel that you hear all the time with like enterprise organizations and then startups, right? Like, you know, in Belgium, or I was actually just speaking to someone the other day from South Sudan, and they're like, yeah, I was like talking to the minister of blah, 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 and I'm like, oh, really? Oh, that's cool. You know, because you know, in these smaller countries, you can get access to, you know, these people a little bit easier, and you can actually influence change, which is really cool.
During our last live hacking event in Belgium, but then a crisis happened, so it didn't go through. But we almost got like the Prime Minister of Belgium to just visit.
No way,
wow,
dude!
Yeah, he really wanted to see the live hacking event, but something came in between. But that was really
that
cool.
Would have been pretty sick. I think I was also talking to somebody who I want to say it was Saudi Arabia that was at a live hacking event there, and then like one of the princes or something came by the event, and I was like, "Whoa, no way! That's kind of nuts." Yeah, because
I just hope they didn't have WhatsApp on the.
Yeah, I know, right? And it's a little bit weird, right? Yeah. It's a little bit weird, right? Because it's like sometimes in security we feel so niched down, right? Like we're you know, even within our community, you know, there are celebrities within our community and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, we're a very, very small community. And so whenever, you know, there's interactions with stuff like that, like people that are well known by the normal populace, right? Like the Prime Minister or, you know, whoever, I think that's really cool to see that intersection.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the radio, you know, backstory a little bit. So you came on, you were talking about cybersecurity in front of a national audience. That's great. Now I want to hear a little bit of the hacker backstory. So how did you get into hacking, and how did you land in bug bounty?
Good question. I guess, and I think this goes for most of us. I'm a cheater, but not in relationships. That is the disclaimer that I always have to say
Nice.
for my wife. But I was never really good at video games or any games in general. It was just lacking. And then I guess I had enough time on my hands to try to find a way to win. And it started off with video games. Do you remember like Pokemon, where, you know, everybody was like trading Pokemons?
Oh, yeah.
And there was like this missing no bug, like this mysterious Pokemon. And
Yep.
to me, that was just magic that you could catch a Pokemon that was not in the Pokédex by doing what? By first going to talk to an old dude in Viridian Town and then flying over to the other side of the map to swim. I mean, it didn't make any sense. And I really wanted to know, and by the way, Live Overflow did an excellent video on that, which we will link in the description.
Wow. Look at, we don't even have to do
okay.
anything.
Very nice.
We'll just let him lead all of it.
This guy's a pro. All right.
I really wanted to know how that stuff worked. And yeah, like it just started from there. And then I also figured, like, I think everybody comes at the point where they have to decide, do I want to risk it? Do I want to become a criminal or not?
Right.
But I was well raised by I loved hacking. I always wanted to break in, but I didn't want to break into jail. So yeah. Then I found Yahoo. Yahoo was my first program. And I got this. They had a terrible submission form. It was like, do you know these mail to links that would open your email client?
Yeah.
So you would fill in this form, and then you would press submit. And I had like mail to links, of course, like any sensible person. I had it disabled in my browser. So I would fill in the form, click the button, nothing happened. So I was just assuming that it was getting sent. But no. It was supposed to open your email client, so you had to send there. But,
no.
So, yeah, I was pretty disappointed. I was quite happy with the launch of HackerOne that basically my reports would arrive. And that's how I started with silly cross-site scripting bugs. Then I also did a lot of unauthorized testing because I didn't know better.
Yeah, of course.
I got lucky with that though. So I think one of the best stories there. And by the way, kids, don't try this anymore because I guess it's new management. And I don't really. I've been telling the story a lot of times, and I don't think they will allow me in their concerts anymore. But I was a big fan of Metallica.
Oh no!
So the rock and roll or the heavy metal band, let's say. And I knew that they had to deal with hackers like a few years back when somebody, I think, stole their whole album or something. And they had like these meet and greets, and I really wanted to meet them. And it was like an online lottery system. Basically, I found a way to do some cheating on the website. But at the end of the day, because the ethical hacker in me stood up, I was like, I cannot take this spot. I need to email that webmaster and tell them what I've done. Tell them, of course, that this is not in bad faith. Please just fix it. And they said, hey, you know what, Inti? You can still come to their show in Belgium. You can come and meet Metallica. They signed my keyboard.
Dude,
I have it here with me. This is for the YouTube watchers.
No way.
So this is like Metallica 2014.
Whoa,
that's crazy.
This is like, yeah.
Dude.
They all loved it. They all loved it.
So
and
crazy.
That's awesome.
I got on stage with them, and I could do like the backing vocals of. They had a song called Sleeping Deaf, and I was just supposed to say deaf. And I think they turned the microphone all the way down. But still, I was standing there in front of that audience with Metallica just realizing, wow, this is the best idol that I've ever done. So, yeah, and that's basically, I mean, that was pretty cool swag. And they're just,
dude.
Then I was working in a grocery store. I quit my job the same day. I was like, I'm going to do this with my life. And I guess it's sometimes timing and being a little bit lucky and just keep on. I think your first bug is the hardest bug, and I just once I got there, everything followed.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I definitely that's a common thing that I've seen with new hackers, and I mean old hackers too, but like finding that first bug, some of it is timing and some of it is just like there is like a natural like acumen or whatever towards hacking, where some people just it clicks like really quickly and they're able to just be like, oh, like that's all I have to, that's what's considered hacking, I could definitely do that, and then they just like go do it, right? And for other people it takes a little bit and they like find that first bug and then it clicks and then they understand that that's what hacking is. But I think whatever it is, like there's always that like light switch moment where you finally sort of like you understand like, oh, that's hacking. Like it's just like I always like to say that hacking is not a skill, it's a mindset, and it's a way that you have to think about stuff. Like you just have to take ordinary situations and you have to kind of like flip it on its head and say, oh, okay, like if I approach this from a different angle and I use this system in a different way, I could abuse this in some unintentional manner, and I can make it do things that it never was intended to do or never expected that it would be doing. And that's what hacking is. It's not like all this like, oh, I'm gonna put a balaclava on and sit in the dark. Like it's like you're just like putting somebody else's ID in where it should be or something like that.
Yeah.
Exactly, and so many people also think that you need this huge amount of technical skill set. There's the problem of some people, lots of people that I talk to, especially I see this with CTF players a lot, like, oh, I'm not good enough yet, I need to learn more. But then I will ask them, like, when do you think you've learned enough? Because some of these bugs are embarrassingly easy, but you just need some persistency. I remember this story from, I was just sitting downstairs and all of a sudden my wife came down and she said, I found it. I was like, honey, she works in HR and communications, by the way. I was like, what did you find? And she popped the cross-site scripting on while she was doing online shopping. And I was like, how did you? She was like, I saw you doing that. Remember a couple of months ago when I finally asked, what is that mysterious cross-site scripting thing? And I showed her that she remembered it. And she was like just entering it in every single search bar of every single website that she would come across. And then months later, she found it. And she then expected a bounty, but I had to tell her, like, no, honey, not all but
the harsh reality.
And stop doing this, by the way, because this will get you in trouble.
Yeah, exactly. Wow, that's super hilarious though, and it is, like you guys are saying, that sort of flash moment, and you see it. Sometimes it comes a little bit sooner, and sometimes it comes a little bit later. And I was talking to a friend the other day. We actually ended up recording it, so I think we'll probably put out some shorts or something like that a little bit later. But it was just a really good, authentic conversation with somebody who's newer to hacking, but has a high propensity, clearly has that mentality, right, for hacking. And he's already found a bunch of bugs, in a hardware device, actually, just from playing around with it and bypassing stuff.
Awesome.
And we were just kind of talking about that. And I think that is a blessing and a curse, that propensity, that ability to do it right off the way, right in the beginning, because when you have a natural knack for it and you find some bugs right away, you have to grind a little bit less. And then when you go up against a target that doesn't match with your style, it becomes very disappointing and very challenging and really destructive to your ability, your self-perception as a hacker, right? And so, it's a double-edged sword. I always say to people that are kind of coming in, and it's great if you've got it, but if you don't, you're going to learn what hacking really looks like most of the time, which is sitting there, reading the JavaScript files, playing with the endpoints, opening 500 repeater tabs until your eyes bleed, and then finally, breaking in.
There's always a better hacker.
Yeah.
And, you may be super happy with the bug that you found, or you may not find a bug for a week or something. But I especially got this during live hacking events when you see maybe you had a bad day, or maybe the target was just not for you. And you see all these people making so much money on exactly the same things that you've been looking at. And then, I just remember I tried to then look at previous scoreboards and see, oh yeah, but in last events, they were way behind me. So, it just all evens out. Nobody can be good at anything. My personal technique was totally different than other people's technique. And sometimes that technique pays off. What I would do is I would really try to first set myself an objective. What do I want to achieve? I'm the hacker, I'm the attacker. Like, what kind of data do I want? And then I would look for the most exotic ways to get there. Like, not the standard ways where I just, I wouldn't even test, the search bar for cross-site scripting, let's say, during a live hacking event, because even if it only takes 15 seconds, it's going to be a waste of time just making an invoice for that $3 split that you would be getting.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah. That's a very important part of, I think, and something we've talked about as well, Joel, in the past, this sort of goal setting piece. Yep. And I think it's core to a lot of hackers' mentalities. And I think it really allows you to, I tested this in a live hacking event recently, and I achieved both of the goals that I was going for. And I think it allows you to really set up something that you want that's very critical, and then get there. But for me, I only got those 2 bugs during this event. It was like those 2 bugs and nothing else, because I was just laser focused on that. So
Yeah.
you definitely do miss stuff when you go after that.
But I would rather find nothing and learn something than finding a lot of mediums and earning maybe a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I've had so many occasions where I had this great idea that is totally show and tell worthy, and I just can't make it work. But then the next event or the next engagement, I tried that idea again, and I just have, I save my notes, crazy ideas, and I test it, and it may work on another target. There's so many times where I just, even after watching other people's show and tells, you go home, you test something on different targets, and it just works. And that is always nice. I've had hackers reach out to me after a live hacking and say, hey, you know what you presented there? I tested it at some of the other targets that I was working on. It worked, and they offer me a 50-50 split, which is always, they shouldn't even do that. But I think it's quite a nice gesture.
Yeah, and I think that objective-based hacking, it's something that I see so commonly in so many of the top hackers, is that even if it's just how they started hacking, for example, very common example that you gave yourself, Inti, is that game hacking. A lot of people, either they're not good at games, so they start using cheats or writing cheats, or getting into hacking games that way, or they want to beat their friends or whatever. And so there's that drive, there's that objective that I want to win at this game. How do I win at this game? Let me find all the ways that I can win at this game. And even if it's not traditional hacking, it's figuring out ways to exploit the system and to, again, that hacker mindset of reworking the situation and setting that objective and figuring out how you can get there in a creative way that still works within the bounds of that system. So I was curious to that extent, for example, Intigriti XSS challenges, how is that something that is helping to train sort of that skill set while also being a real world example? Do you think that having an objective like that is really useful? Because it feels like it's basically the same thing. You have an objective, this is vulnerable to XSS. The question is how.
Good question. I think we've actually stopped doing solely cross-site scripting challenges because people were asking for different stuff as well. But the fun thing about cross-site scripting is that there's just so many ways. And it also, whenever we try to do a challenge, we have one criteria. What do people actually learn from this? And it's not about in all transparency, it rarely occurs that we will see one of these payloads actually ending up working on some of the programs because they're so exotic. But it does help us filter out the people that are willing to go that extra mile and willing to do some research, and then maybe then they will put the same effort into debugging GraphQL, for example. Some hackers will see a GraphQL endpoint and there it stops, they move on. But we really need these people that are extremely good, not necessarily already have the knowledge, because I guess you can just figure out most of the knowledge you need on a specific target in a week, unless it's maybe hardware. But even then, programs like Intel, they've set up fantastic educational tracks for people just to learn how that stuff works. I think it's on the platforms to help educate people with challenges, but also to enable educators, because we cannot do this alone. And that is if there's one thing that I'm proud of with Intigriti, is that I think we were one of the first platforms to actively engage with the creator community, sponsoring people on YouTube, etc. Just in the first place, just to give them something back. And we were still small, we didn't have the biggest budget, but still to say, hey, this is really cool. And it's also interesting to see, even as a small player, what kind of an impact that made on the, dare I say, hackfluencers scene in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really liked what you were touching on just a moment ago with, the XSS challenges. They don't necessarily, and sometimes they do equip hackers with knowledge that they need to actually exploit a bug on a program. But what they do, what this does result in is you identify hackers that are willing to go that extra mile to learn the thing that they don't know and make that happen. right? And I think that's one of the key skills in hacking, and especially in bug bounty, is this concept of like, okay, I know just from my general, inch deep knowledge that this is sort of roughly possible, or I have a suspicion that this is roughly possible. Let's take this larger understanding of web architecture, of, browser mechanics, of API, structure, and apply it and try to learn the details that I need to make this specific bug work. And it's almost never all in the brain. You almost always have to Google something. You've almost always got to, fiddle with your exploit for, 20, 30 minutes at least. And I think that's the kind of skill that really, really takes you far in hacking.
Yeah, I would call it like learning how to brainstorm on your own.
Yeah.
Lots of people can't, like, what really helped for me is just to get a notebook and to just start scribbling things and like start drawing diagrams, etc. Like, okay, here's my goal, here's all. And just like a lot of people are very good in a brainstorm if they're with a team. Just taking a moment, I mean, you can also buy a whiteboard and start like putting post-its on that. You don't need any other people from that. And sometimes it can be relieving to be away from the screen. It can be very, very stimulating from your brain to just like, I would try to limit my screen time and try to do most of the thinking while I was walking. I need to walk around in order for my brain to function.
So common, yeah.
I will say some of the best like thinking like moments I've had are like when I've like I've had like a light bulb or like something that's clicked. I've been either on the toilet or in the shower. It's like, it's like every time I'm just like sitting there like thinking, just like I've got nothing better to be doing, and then it just like it snaps, and I'm like, oh shit, go, pop the bug.
Man, but sometimes it also brings you in embarrassing situations or uncomfortable situations. Like I remember, I'm not sure, I don't think I can reveal the target, but basically I found this vulnerability involving email bounces that would basically result in a full account takeover, zero click. And I was working on that bug for like 3 or 4 days already. Took the plane, didn't figure it out, bought like the crappy Wi-Fi, but didn't help. That's another $15 lost because I was not able to guess like a T-Mobile number. No, usually on United, if you just guess a T-Mobile number, you can get in. Not eligible for the bug bounty, by the way. But I arrived and we went for a drink with some people that I haven't seen in years. And after this like second beer, like there's something with the second beer always.
Balmer's
all of a sudden, I was distracted. I was thinking of my bug and it clicked, and I remember apologizing, saying, "I'm so sorry. I have to go to the hotel right now." I just took some cash, smashed it on there, and I ran to the hotel because I could no longer wait. I had this thing and it needed to happen then. And that's when it happens, but it also happens, the feeling at 2 a.m. right before you want to go to sleep, that you find like, oh, one more request. It's like gamblers, like, oh, one more spin. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm hitting the jackpot. And next thing you know, it's 8 a.m. and your wife gets up and she wonders, what the hell have you been doing?
Oh my gosh, dude. I definitely feel that with the right before you go to bed. So many times I'll it'd be like 3, right? I'll go to bed. This is normally my peak, is 3 here. Like I can't, there's no 8 a.m. for Justin. Justin goes to bed at 4 or, yeah. But, I'll go to bed. I'll go to bed at 3. I'll be laying in bed just as I'm about to fall asleep. And then, the eyes shoot open and I get out of bed and I'm like, I've got it. And you go downstairs and you get it. And it's so common, you mentioned before as well, such a common theme with top hackers that, going for a walk, taking a shower, getting in the hot tub, as I always endorse, it gets the brains going. And especially when you're trying to exploit something and you're very close, this isn't necessarily going to help you, when you don't really have an active lead, right? Not very likely, but if you do have an active lead and you're about to exploit something and you just can't get it, taking that step away helps so much.
Yeah.
Or talking to somebody about it. And there's a lot of people that want to collaborate, but something that I really appreciated about live hacking events is like the happy hour with the customer. And then you see like some sort of people. Some people will just hang around with the hackers. Other people, if it's 1 hour, they will spend every minute of the 60 minutes they will spend like screening the customer, talking to them, and seeing. Like I remember Franz Rosen's first question would be, "Where would you look if you were to find a critical vulnerability?" And very often they would come with something, and some people would call it social engineering. I call it surprise collaboration. But I mean, at the end of the day,
surprise collaboration. I like that.
You know, everybody wins, and typically, you know, the customers is very like we recently had the live hacking event as well, and we came up with the crazy idea. Hey, can we just have like some sort of system where we can have hackers grab through the source code if they have a very good suggestion? And I loved how that team was. Yeah, why not? I mean, we have NDA signed, so
yeah.
And they're like, I believe that some people found some really good bugs because of that.
Absolutely.
And I'm looking to extend that principle, depends on whether the customers want it or not, to other live hacking events as well. Because you know the feeling that you're almost there, and you're like, I can spend another 10 hours on this or focusing on something else. I want to know how many bugs people have lost simply because they didn't find that last mile.
Just little smidgen,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah, we've seen this with
and typically
at the most recent event, AWS. I think we could say this. AWS did this thing called bar raisers, where essentially they had a couple people who were employees who worked at the company, and if you were really close on something, or you felt like you could raise the impact somehow, or you had something that you just thought like might just need some escalation, you could bring it to them, and they would help you escalate it from like an internal perspective. Like, oh, here's what you can do with this. Like, here's how you can help, raise that impact. And I think that's so valuable because, like a hacker can get to that level. We've all seen it. Like certain hackers get to the point where they're like at or beyond what an employee is in terms of like their internal knowledge of how the internal systems work. But getting there takes so much time and effort that having a shortcut makes it so much easier and such a better hacker experience to just say,
more productive.
Yeah, like I'm like one step away. Can you save me 5 hours or 5 days worth of trying to escalate this and just help me get that last bit? Because if I was a determined hacker or like a third party adversary or whatever, I would definitely spend that time, but I don't want to right now. And
well, like it's making, not just making I don't it want to.
So much like it just makes it so much better.
It does, and it's not just I don't want to either. It's also like let's work together to make this a most efficient process. Because then what are you going to do once they save you that 5 hours? You're going to go hack other stuff, right? And so I have this conversation with the team a lot, in live hacking adjacent sort of scenarios or even live hacking events, where it's like, okay, hey, I've got this thing, and I am positive that it's going to be exploitable. I just need this one piece of information. I can spend 5 hours exploiting it, or you can look at the code, just tell me what the route needs to be, and then we can just say, all said and done, and I go and find other vulnerabilities for you in that 5 hours, right? So it's really a win-win, and I'd love to hear that, Inti, that you guys have integrated that in some scenarios at Intigriti. Grepping through source code would be such a huge asset. So that's really cool to hear. So we've talked a lot about, methodology. We've talked about, live hacking events. We've talked about all sorts of fun things. I want to, like we mentioned sort of before, and unlike your experience on national television, Critical Thinking is a very technical podcast, and we like to get in the weeds about technical stuff. So I was thinking before you came on the podcast, I was like, man, what are some cool bugs that Inti's found? And then like you said, like 16 of them, came into my head. The ones that I thought would be the most interesting would be the ticket trick, that weird little CSS injection font weirdness that you found at that live hacking event, that bug crowd live hacking event. And somehow you were presenting it to us inside of like a little train car. Do you remember that? That was weird.
Yeah, not sure if that was legal.
Yeah, I know, right?
But,
that was
a surprise show and tell.
It was little mini show and tell. Then this password/API key CAPTCHA bug. So I guess take your pick. Where do you want to start?
maybe let's start with the CSS injection
Okay.
because it's, I mean, in essence, it was just a terrible bug, but it resulted in me getting plain text passwords.
Oh my
And
gosh.
it's always like, how do you like? I've had a few. I even had like a content injection that the actual impact was remote code execution because I could just inject something in a code that people were supposed to like copy and paste and execute as root on their
That was
system.
my first live hacking event, by the way, when you did that, and I was like, "Who the heck is this guy?" So that's amazing. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, that one was really simple. But then the CSS one, I mean, and I feel really sorry for the team. I wasn't doing particularly great, and the feeling where you're like, I'm exhausted of this target.
Yeah.
It's pretty hardened, but I had this one little bug,
Hmm.
and I was like, I just want to max this out. So I wrote this like 9-page report that I don't think anybody read in the end. I think they just called me and said, we don't have time for this. Like, give us a demo, give us a TLDR
Right.
because we're not going to triage this. I do understand that.
Yeah.
Um, but what I did is I found the CSS injection, and basically the only thing I could do is like add a font and change like the position and basically style of the page.
So was this
I couldn't even.
was this a CSS
Yeah.
injection via query parameter? Was it a post body request? Was it an upload?
Was stored.
It was stored.
So
Okay.
basically, yeah, it was like some sort of online collaboration thingy,
Hmm.
and I could just like as an other platform user, I could send you like an invite, and it would kind of show up on your homepage.
Oh, sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I basically had like I could not pop any cross-site scripting. Tried really hard, didn't work, but I could mess around with the styles. But because it was on the homepage, I was like, this is not a login page, but what if I can make it look like the login page? And then I started just moving all stuff around and around and around because you cannot, like with the CSS injection, you cannot really add elements easily.
Hmm.
You have to just work with the elements, and every single element you can probably like make it look totally different. But then at the end of the day, I wanted to have like 100% match of the login page.
Yeah.
And then I took like a text box, and what was interesting about the text box is that it was basically a form where people, I don't remember exactly what it was, but let's say in the event of me inviting you, that you could type something back,
Or like a
maybe
comment or
chat.
something. Yeah. Yeah.
Something that I could see if you would like hit enter. And I would take that as the password field. So basically then I found the font because nobody would just see their own password and
Right.
then submit it like that. It doesn't. So I found the font that it's like all dots, like it really like the black dots if you type a password. And I would just replace for that specific form field. I would replace that with the black font style. I think I made the font myself. It didn't exist.
Yeah.
on
You
something,
mentioned
but I
that you
made it
had.
myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I hosted it somewhere and it got loaded. And then basically what ended up happening is that I would send you this invite. You would open like it was stored. So next time you would go to the page, you would see the login screen and you would just try to log in. And even though it was not a password field, it would look like a password field. You would press login, nothing would happen, but you had then sent me a chat message with your plain text password.
Oh my gosh, dude. That is like an amazing vulnerability. Okay, so you send us, like an invite or something like that. It gets there, you trigger the CSS injection. The CSS injection allows you to reorder elements. So like maybe you like grabbed a div or something like that, put it as white background, overlaid it over the whole page, position absolute, right? And then you took elements from the page, moved them around, put them into spot to make it look like the home page. And then whenever they would press the submit button or whatever, that would
login,
the login button, right? That would take their password, which was concealed via a custom font, and send it directly to you.
Yeah, exactly.
So crazy.
Oh my gosh, dude. I don't know that I fully understood that when you did that show and tell. I have goosebumps right now, man. That is amazing. And actually, and so, but I do remember that day. One thing that I do remember from that conversation we had in that little weird train car thing was was that CSS is a lot more powerful than I thought it was, right? So I've been looking at CSS and bugs ever since, and one of my highest paid bounties at this point, well into the 5-figure range, was a CSS injection bug. So thank you for that, for one. But for two, this actually reminds me of a bug that I found that I'll just mention really quickly here, which is very similar, actually. You'd send an invite, and it would go to the homepage, and it would be stored, and there was a CSS injection, but it was only in an image, right? So you could define the background image, right? So what I did was I put the logout URL there, right, as that background image. So every time they'd log in, it would go to the homepage, it would load up my invite, and then it would log them back out. And so it DOSed the whole application. And so these sort of, like, I think being exposed to these sort of creative attack vectors, like reordering the whole page or like reforcing the logout, those should really expand your attack vector ideation, and help, you understand what kind of bugs are possible out there. So Inti, thanks for sharing that, man.
It's not about the bug per se, because a lot of people will say, oh, it's CSS injection must be low,
right,
it's cross-site scripting, it must be medium. That doesn't always count. I mean, you will have programs that are more receptive to the actual impact, and we always encourage them to. Obviously, when it comes to CVS, it may be a little bit more tricky, because then, CVS doesn't really consider, or at least not the CSS v3, if like it's the password that you're stealing or something else, and then maybe you could argue that you could have full control, but it can get messy quite quickly.
It can.
One last example, I would, now that I'm thinking about it, about a cool CSS injection that I once found that I think got over 5K reward, maybe it was 6K. That was like in, I won't tell the service, but it was some sort of document signing service. Like, I just knew that it had some legal importance. And I found a way within the PDF that would first preview to the user before they would sign it. I had this like CSS injection. There's not a lot you can do with it, because at the end of the day, they read it and they sign it. And both the CSS injection was present on the front end and in the actual downloaded PDF that would be the official PDF that is now legally binding. So the only thing I did is I put like an image over the whole screen, like over the whole page. But then I looked at the user agent. So this was an externally hosted image. And my user agent would do, like, depending on the user agent, my server would like file a normal contract the moment they would see it. But the moment that the PDF parser would do its thing and make everything legal, it would see that it's now like PDF, wiki, whatever, like some sort of library, and it would serve a totally different document, still with their signature on it.
Oh no!
So I could basically have people sign whatever I wanted just by having a CSS injection, server-side CSS injection that was also on the front end. So just by looking at the user agent, I was able to, that impact is quite high, of course, because you can just. And then you can start gaslighting people like, oh, you didn't read the contract properly, and you can just change it afterwards. It was a mess. And I'm very happy that the company properly assessed that.
Yeah, that's a very high impact vuln. Joel, this makes me think of a bug. I don't know, like a bug by John Botterini. Did he tell you about that bug last year?
I don't think he did.
Okay, so John, I don't know. We got to have John on the podcast sometime. But
sure.
The TLDR of it, with being, vague, is that he found a way to force the company to violate a bunch of like standards that the government has set up that have penalties in place, right? So he's like, all right, I submit this request, and it sends off this chain that like registers something with some third party, government thing, right? And essentially, because there was a rate limiting vuln there, he could do it a bunch of times. And it would result in just like massive fines for the company, like 15K a pop, sort of fines for the company. And they like he reported this bug, and the legal team like was in contact with him within the next 5 hours. Like, please, let's have a conversation about this. And I just think like that is like such a John bug for one, like just very thoroughly understanding. the whole system, even to the point where you understand the fines that are in place from a governmental perspective that affects this sort of functionality. So
yeah,
it's beautiful to see bugs like that.
I think one of the things that I love about sort of all the bugs that we're talking about right now is that if you were to take this from like a purely like a bug like classification standpoint, like what kind of bug is this? Probably most of them would just be like immediately considered like out of scope or whatever, because like either phishing or
lows
or HTML injection or whatever, right? But it's not about that. It's about figuring out like what is the security impact, what is the risk model for this company, and how do I target my bug to apply perfectly to that risk model, even if classically it would be like out of scope. How can I make it in scope by figuring out the way that to make it impactful for this company? And I think a lot of times hackers will find a bug. They'll be like, oh, this is, HTML injection. Let me move on, find something more severe, find an IDOR or whatever. And they just like leave it as is. But if you stick around and you like really persist and you take a little bit of extra time and effort and you figure out what is that threat model, how do I apply this to the threat model in a meaningful way, you can really escalate the impact of those bugs to take something that would typically probably not even be worth a bounty, it might not even be worth a report, and turn it into something that is super critical, super high, like definitely worth a bounty, and one of those like forever stories that you're going to tell about an awesome bug that you found and how you escalated it.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that making that translation between a risk model and program guideline is still something that we as bug bounty platforms that's a problem that we need to solve. It's a really difficult problem because CVSS is quite in terms of expectation management. At least you can debate about metrics, and still it's not perfect. I'm looking forward to CVSS v4. But then again, how do you like properly translate? Because not every company as well is, like I understand this, willing to share their risk model with the outside world, especially if they have like a public bug bounty program. So I think that like in terms of transparency, that is still one of the challenges or unsolved problems that we'll have to tackle in the next few years.
Yeah, totally agree. So let's hop back over to another vuln, the ticket trick. I think this is probably the bug that you're most well known for, having found it, discovered it, built the logo for it, got it out there.
Give it a name and a logo, and you're good.
Did you get a domain and a logo before you found it?
Yeah.
Initially, I wanted to, and the report is public. Initially, I believe I wanted to name it Horrible Decision. I wanted to name it Slackdoor.
Oh, wow.
I thought he was going to say, I wanted to name it Horrible Decision.
Yeah, say about it. I mean, that's one way to describe bugs.
The Slack Corporation rightfully did not agree with
that
because it was not even their problem. So,
right. No,
we went for tickets.
That's great. So just give us a little high level overview of that, and then maybe you can talk about some of the ways that you've used that bug to gain access to organizations.
Again, it started with I was just bored and I picked a random program which was GitLab. I think it was even like a VDP back then. And I saw that they had like this. I've always been intrigued by emails. I think I found lots of bugs, but I think my most interesting bugs had something to do with email. What makes email so interesting is that basically it bypasses all the security application logic, like stuff like 2FA, etc. If I can get into your email, I can probably like reset your password, but also like there's a whole bunch of information that these email systems will just send, like links to exports, whatever. So I was always intrigued by that, and I saw this feature of GitLab that you could send something to an @gitlab.com email address to like create a ticket. So I was just messing around with that, and at first I was like trying to send over like payloads, attachments with a PHP file, whatever. I didn't even realize that GitLab is not running on PHP at all. So I was a kid back then. But then I was like, but what can I, like, this is a behavior. And a behavior plus a good story can be a vulnerability. And that is actually what it turned out to be, because then I was also like, okay, what kind of other data do they have? And where are these people working with, or what are they working with on a daily basis? I was going through their job section, doing some reconnaissance there, and they were presenting themselves. They're quite transparent, quite open, and they said, we do a lot of things through Slack. So I went through their Slack page. I was like, I want to get into this Slack. There must be so much interesting information in there. And of course, there's a couple of ways to do it. The traditional ways are just like maybe trying to hijack a rogue integration, trying to hijack the accounts. But I saw that anybody with an @GitLab account could simply sign up. So I was like, hey, let me grab this email address that I got for my ticket tracker on GitLab. And it was like a very long email address, and pasted in there because it was a valid @gitlab.com email address. So I pasted it in there. I pressed, okay, I want to sign up for the Slack. Slack said, okay, we've sent a registration email to that email address. And surely enough, a new ticket got opened on my instance saying, hey, welcome to the GitLab Slack. Because, it wasn't valid @gitlab.com email address. And yeah, that's how I got into their Slack. They were still a VDP back then. They went to a paid program like a couple of months later, which I still regret. But I told the CEO, which is a really cool dude, I met him during a live hacking event, like in some sort of karaoke bar. It was a weird setting. And I told him about this, like, yeah, I probably got you one of your most impactful bugs outside of the platform.
Yeah.
And I got nothing for it because you were still a VDP. And the cool thing then was he took his wallet, took $100 in cash and just had it over.
No way.
Thank you so much. And okay, it was only $100, but we didn't have to do that. We still did it, and I really appreciate it.
That's
awesome.
So meaningful. What an amazing way to connect with the hacker there.
Because it was his own money, so we can't expense that, right? So that's really appreciate it.
That's so cool, man. What a cool guy, and what a great story, and what a great bug. Yeah, I've always been fascinated by that, and I've never actually found one myself. I've read your research time and time again, but I've never actually gone down the, the rabbit hole to find one. And the reason for that is and I've seen plenty of places where I can do like, send an email to, @whatever.com, sort of situations. But the problem for me is I have a hard time finding things like Slack and I think maybe Asana was vulnerable for a little while or something like that, where I can utilize that email. So how do you do that?
So the thing is, Slack actually mitigated part of the problem. They didn't have to do this, but right now, if you were to sign up for Slack, you will get like an invitation email, and it will say like no reply dash, and then a very long random token @slack.com. And I really appreciated that because even though it was not necessarily their problem, that's a misconfiguration on their client side, they still understood that this could have been really impactful. And they changed the way that so I could basically no longer sign up for certain services with, for example, no reply @slack.com. So I would just get a ticket. And that would typically make it a little bit harder. But yeah, it's one of these bugs where not a single instance is the same, and the impact can be greatly different. But like the base scenario is typically, look, sometimes what happens is that a company has like a help desk, and they have typically the user management system is not properly aligned because companies don't really build that themselves. They still need a way for users to view their tickets. And what sometimes ends up happening is that people have an account on the platform itself, but not really on the ticket portal, on the service desk. So what you can sometimes do, if you know where to find like the self-registrations or API endpoints for these things, is you create an account in their name. Sometimes they will not require you to validate your email address, and then you can see all of their open tickets, or every email that they send to that email address to like support you can hijack, but also knowing that people would send stuff like GDPR requests, etc. to there. It's always interesting to try and sign up with a victim email on the support instance, because then you can start intercepting emails to support ads from that email address.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's extremely impactful. And all of these email things are super fascinating. I know we've only got, I think you have a hard stop in 10 minutes. So I do want to, and unfortunately we're not going to get to everything that we had on the list for today, but I do want you to give us a quick overview of the time you used a CAPTCHA to pwn a company. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It was like some sort of password manager, and I was just browsing around and I saw that my own like test Facebook password was being displayed in plain text on the website. So just like in an API endpoint, and that's normal, right? Because password managers, in essence, they have
to do that.
store your
Yeah.
plain text password. That's the only company that has a valid use case to do this.
I was going to say, I don't think that's normal.
Yeah, but with
But in this
password
case,
managers, it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's literally like the only case. And still then, I think there's like some mitigations around that still. But back then, it was pretty normal. So I was looking at my own password and I was like, oh, damn, like I cannot, like it's probably pretty bad because if somebody has like a cross-site scripting bug on that asset, you can just grab it. But that was not the case. It was pretty well isolated. But I did notice that you could embed it into any page. So you could just put it in like an iframe. And then I could, for example,
no X-frame
make
options.
a website.
Okay.
Like, Justin, here's your Facebook password.com. And I would literally show you your Facebook password just by embedding that on my page. But how sandboxes work is that I couldn't, like as the owner of that website, I would not be able to access that information. I could only display it to you. So that is, of course, where your hacker mindset has to start popping up. And then you have to figure out, okay, I can display this to my victim. How can I make them give it to me? And naturally, I was just thinking of CAPTCHAs because that's the only kind of scenario where somebody is shown something and they type it back to you.
Right.
But literally nobody would ever just be like, oh, let me solve this CAPTCHA and be like, oh, that's my password. Unless you use one of these randomly generated, then it's quite funny. So I made this whole POC where I would like isolate because I knew how wide and tall the letters were. I would isolate all the letters, like work with the average length of a password and added something more to that. And then try to fit them all like in a CAPTCHA box. Applied a whole lot of CSS wonderful, like filters on it to make it seem a little bit distorted. So every letter would be tilted and, a little distorted at a different degree. So it would look like a valid
It
CAPTCHA.
looked like a CAPTCHA
like,
too, man. I swear to
shift them
God.
around.
It looked so much like a CAPTCHA.
Yeah, I would also like flip them around so all letters would be at random positions and people would really recognize the passwords anymore.
Right.
If you're filling in a CAPTCHA, you don't expect it, but certainly you won't think, oh, maybe this is an anagram of my password. So yeah, it just worked, and I was able to, during the show and tell, to present like this CAPTCHA that would actually just feature people's password, and they would fill it in and with their plain text Facebook or whatever password.
Oh my gosh, dude, that's amazing. Wow. Can you imagine typing in a caption and be like, wait, this is a perfect anagram for my password, like that's hilarious. And I think another way you could even, and I don't think this attack works anymore because of the way same site cookies would work. You wouldn't be able to iframe in a page and have the cookie still sent to it cross origin, but unless they have same site set to none on those cookies. But the other thing was like, everyone knows that time when they have to submit a CAPTCHA like 2 or 3 times too. So if it was longer, right? Like you could say, all right, the first 8 characters are going in this one, and then they submit it, and it's gonna be like, no,
try again,
and then try again, and then it's the next 8 characters or whatever, and like you could get up to like 16, 20 something, length of passwords.
Yeah,
so
just keep failing.
I thought that was such
CAPTCHA,
a creative. Yeah, and you presented this at a live hacking event, and it looked exactly like a CAPTCHA, and I was like, I would absolutely do this, and that was terrifying to me.
I believe I called it the gotcha.
The gotcha, that's it, dude.
Yeah, gotcha.
So freaking good.
Amazing. Cool.
Well, that's awesome, man. Yeah, we only had a couple. Go ahead, Joel.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, before we run out of time, I did want you to talk a little bit about the upcoming live hacking event for Intigriti. I know we're like kind of hard pivoting here, but again, we only have a couple minutes, so would you mind giving us sort of a rundown of sort of what's going on and what's coming up and all that kind of stuff?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just give it TLDR because I do have a hard stop. But yeah, we're running a pretty exciting live hacking event with Intel in October in Lisbon.
Yeah,
it's going to be their first biggest live hacking event ever. We've done education live hacking events or smaller scale things with them before, but this one is going to be insane. The targets, I can tell you, are going to be very good.
Oh my gosh!
We always try to take care of our hackers as well, making sure that they not only get the opportunity to find really cool bugs, but also get the opportunity just to have fun and to socialize and basically do that community building around the Intel program. Yeah, and one of the things, and maybe that's the last thing I can say about that, one of the things that I really appreciated about this kind of event is that basically Intel is kind of democratizing live hacking events a little bit. So they're like, for local hackers and for people that happen to be around, etc., they could just like apply for non-sponsored seats.
Yeah.
You know that there's always this mysterious group of people that always gets invited to live hacking event. And even there we have rules for, but to some people it seems like it's, you know, we're just inviting our friends, and that's not really true. There's a lot of parameters that come into play, but still people sometimes really want to go. And what I really love about this concept is that people can just pay for their flights and go there and have fun and do it. And I really think that is a cool concept that we are exploring for other events as well, because I think that everybody at least should have the chance in their life to attend one of these.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. I know so many people really appreciate that. I've been talking to people, and that has been making a ruckus in the community for sure. You know, people are really excited about that. Joel and I are both going to be there. We're both very excited for it. So yeah, really looking forward to it. Inti, thanks for coming on, man. We can find you. Actually, you have two Twitters, so I don't know which one you want to call out.
Take security. So I have Inti DC, but that's my Dutch account.
That's your Dutch
Sometimes
account.
I tweet in English. Okay. It's quite confusing. So that started off as my radio account.
Okay.
So that is also why I have a huge Dutch follower base on that.
Right.
I've made tweet in Dutch. But everything bug bounty related is going to be secure Inti.
Secure Inti on Twitter.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. Anything else you wanna shout out with your socials or Intigriti or anything?
Shout out to you guys for setting this up and creating content for the rest of the community. I think it's super valuable. I love what you guys have been doing, and I look forward to see more of it in the future. You guys are my heroes, so thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Inti.
Thank you very much.
That's awesome, man. We'll definitely be looking forward to the live hacking event and seeing you on the Intigriti platform.
Yeah.
See you soon.
All right. See you, man.
See you.
Bye.
That's the pod.